Welcome to The Kingdom Sleeps, the fantasy bedtime story decided by the roll of a dice. My name's Andrew, I'll be your story master for this evening.
And I'm Orla, and I'll be playing the role of Nina.
Tonight, we'll be exploring the vast and sprawling forest landscape of Moriwold with a new character to the show, Nina, played by Orla. Orla, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Before we get into tonight's story, would you like to just give our listeners a little bit more background on who Nina is and where she comes from?
Absolutely. Nina is a young fae woman, and she grew up in Moriwold with her family, who are heavily involved in the Artisans Guild. But when she was a young child, she was sent away to the Immersion forest to live with her oppa, Steph. And so that's where she lives, at Lark's Grove, which is an orchard, and they are mostly fruit farmers. And you'll recognise Nina by her wings that are similar to moth wings that lie folded over her back. She has strawberry blonde hair that's curly and very unruly, and around her face it's bleached more blonde from her citrusy fingers that she always pushes her hair back from her face. And she wears really thick glasses. She's short-sighted, and they always slip down her nose.
And we look forward to learning more about Nina in tonight's story. But before we do, I'd like to once again thank all our listeners for joining us tonight, and remind you that if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Nina or the world, you can join us in our Discord, where you can find the link below. Or perhaps if you'd like to help support the podcast to get bigger and better, you can head over to our Patreon and support us there. But for now, close your eyes, make yourselves comfortable, and join us where the kingdom sleeps. Tonight, we begin our story in the lush and sprawling region of Moriwold, a country-sized network of interconnecting forests, where the lines between nature and civilization become blurred as entire towns and cities are built amongst the growing trees and vegetation. And in the centre of this land stands the gargantuan Honzite tree, a tree that scrapes the sky like a mountain and can be seen from hundreds of miles around, and in many ways has become the symbol of the heart and the soul of Moriwold. And to look upon Moriwold from above, you would see also this broad and long, meandering river, the Kopakawa River, gliding through its centre. And if you were to follow this river along, away from Moriwold's centre, towards the edge of this large forest, just where the trees begin to slightly dwindle, you'd come upon a slightly more pastoral, slightly more open land. And nestled within here, you'll find a wide, open glade that has been filled with myriad kinds of fruit-bearing trees and bushels, all of which have been planted to create this unusual, diverging network of walkways that are scattered with stone shrines and totems, giving it almost a labyrinthian nature. But that, to look upon, is also very clearly, meticulously and lovingly looked after. And at the head of this labyrinthian orchard stands a tall, strong tree, and built into the lower boughs is what looks like a half glass greenhouse, half wooden cabin-looking building with this wide wooden platform around the base of it that forms a balcony. And also what appears to be hundreds of gently twinkling and knocking wind chimes hung around its edges, making this beautiful chorus of sound where you can see small gliding mamu spirits weaving in and around them. And this place is Lark's Grove, Nina's home. Can you now describe where it is that Nina sits in this scene and what she's up to?
I think it is the early hours of the morning, and the first rays of light are drifting through the open sections of the wall. The wall's not completely closed. And feeling the rays of sun on her face, she is waking up gently in the very early hours of the morning. She is in her hammock, and the very first thing that she does before even opening her eyes is reaching out a hand, trying to find the soft fur of her friend Kota.
So as Nina reaches out this hand, bleary-eyed, looking for her friend Kota, she will find that he's not readily nearby. Roll a perception check for me.
That is a 15.
It is not long after your initial search that you notice Kota, this long, stoatish, martinish-like creature with winged arms and soft, silky fur, sits upon one of the edges of the windowsill and is in a bowed and defensive position as a rather plump black bird sits on the sill with him. And as far as it appears, is attempting to peck its beak towards Kota's hands, where he's holding something very protectively. And there is quickly a series of gentle but warning growls coming from Kota's mouth, and some short, sharp squawks coming from the beak of the black bird.
Oh no. Conscious that her Oppa is sleeping in just the next bunk, she will gently sit forward. Kota! Kota! Don't you dare! Calling out to her familiar to try and coax him away. The growls are the first warning signs, But once Kota gets angry, we're all in trouble.
As you call out, you see Kota's small head just move very slightly over his shoulder to give you a short, sharp, glaring eye. And you hear his growling begin to soften slightly as he still tries his very best to maintain whatever it is he is protecting in his hands and shuffles backwards away from this black bird. However, the black bird begins to move in his direction, getting ever more overbearing, and suddenly makes a short, sharp peck towards his hands, and there is an almighty squawking that comes from Kota's mouth as he growls as ferociously as a small animal like himself can do, in the face of this blackbird, who is startled quite some and retreats by hopping back a few steps on the sill. But you fear he's already made quite a lot of noise and is beginning to rile himself up to potentially make an attack.
Shoot, shoot, shoot. Nina will quickly swing her legs out of the bunk, out of the hammock, onto the wooden floor, and her eyes still just opening, fumble for her apron that is hanging right next to her hammock, for the snacks that she keeps always on hand for moments like this, emergencies like this. And finding 2 nuts in her pocket, she will once again try and get Kota's attention, but also get the bird's attention. She has 2 treats, and she is going to try and very tactfully throw them in alternating directions. One being thrown for the bird, and the other trying to lure Kota towards her.
Roll me a dexterity for me.
That's a natural 1.
So as you grab each of these nuts, ready to make your swift and tactful throw towards each of the animals, glaring in each of their eyes to try and somewhat gauge what quick movements they may make. You throw them in alternating directions, or at least you attempt to, but they unfortunately seem to converge and land into one spot on the floor of your room as they scatter, making small knocking noises across the wooden floor, and both animals jump to the ground, and there is a cacophony of squawking and growling as the 2 animals decide which snack it is that they're going for and attempt to go for each other's snack, and it all turns into a raucous noise.
Oh, in a moment of panic, Nina will grab that apron and jump into the pile with them, trying to grab Kota, scoop him up in the apron, although throwing herself into the mix, I think, is creating more noise, more ruckus, knocking things over as she's going.
Roll me an animal handling, if you would.
$19.
Nina quite expertly, having done this many times before, creates almost a small pouch of her apron and manages to wrap Kota up and disarm him. And in this time he's managed to obtain one of the nuts and hold on to the snack that he was furtively trying to protect beforehand. And so he lays in your apron quite content and begins to gently nibble upon the nut that he found upon the floor. The bird, during this time, startled by your presence and the tumult of everything that was going on, quickly snatches up one of the nuts and very swiftly shoots out of the window. Roll me a perception check.
Natural 20.
Is at this time that, without having even really looked behind you towards your Opa's bed, you suddenly realize that you probably would have heard something from him by now if he were laying fast asleep as you imagined. And so you intuit that he is probably not in the room with you, and as you turn around, you'll notice that his hammock is empty.
That's unusual. He is normally an early riser, but this is very early. And I look down into my arms at Kota. Yes, you're very happy with yourself. And I think the first thing she'll do is have a quick scan around for where Steph might be. If he's maybe already working in his workshop, or perhaps somewhere out on the orchard, she'll have a look on the balcony.
Which one would she like to do first?
I think she knows Steph well enough that first thing in the morning he tends to go to his workshop, making sure everything's in order before doing a walk around the orchard, so she'd go there first to do the workshop.
And is Kota in tow with her?
Kota is securely wrapped in this blanket, and I think she's keeping a very good eye on him, so she'll bring him, but cautiously.
So as Nina, in a swaddled position, carries Kota, a very happy Kota, along with her towards Steph's workshop, she sees almost immediately Steph sat in his greenhouse with the early morning sun shining through, light dancing across the floor, filtered through the colourful stained glass on the ceiling, with the beautiful, gently swaying trees around the perimeter, creating a serene effect. Steph sat down at one of his benches, hunched over something, and whilst Nina can only see Steph from behind, feels that he is very pensive in what he's doing, with the stillness and enclosedness of his body language. And she can see, just as she gets to the entranceway of his workshop, just one arm gently moving back and forth, and some sort of scratching noise coming from whatever it is he happens to be working on at the desk.
Nina will take a moment in the doorway, a moment before Steph notices that she's there in this beautiful morning light. Just watch him for a second, and she'll try even to kind of twist to see what exactly he's working on. Steph is often a private or secretive man, And so she takes every opportunity to get a better look at what he's doing.
And is she trying to do this without Steph's knowledge?
Oh, absolutely.
To roll me a stealth check, please.
That is a 19.
Almost reactively to the serene environment of the room, Nina is able to glide softly through the entranceway and just come very silently forward a few steps in order to peer over the shoulder of Steph. As she does so, she can just about see that he is holding what looks like a large, perhaps hand-sized tool of wood and metal. And in his hand holds a piece of polished stone that, to Nina's observation, looks quite like bright stone, as she's familiar with, but with some other interesting colours lined within it. And as she comes a few steps further forward, Steph is so absorbed within his work that she's able to creep a little further forward if she chooses to.
I think, conscious not to frighten him out of his skin, she will perhaps just lean to the side as opposed to encroaching on him any further. But still trying to figure out. It's unusual. She's not seen him working with something like this before. And her curiosity is piqued. So she'll try and get a slightly better vantage, but also not wanting to give her old granddad a heart attack.
As Nina very tactfully attempts to just slightly get a better view of what's going on, she's able to just crane herself without moving too much to get a much better look of what's going on. Roll an arcane check for me. Nina is certainly not ignorant of the world. She learns as much as she can from wherever she can, an avid reader and listener of tales. And looking at what her grandfather now works on, even though it's partially obscured by half of his shoulder, she clearly knows this to be some form of new bright stone magic, one of these bright stone sigils or totems that have been cropping up all across the kingdom of late. Although these interesting colours of blue and yellow that seem to line the inside of it, almost as if it were some kind of sedimentary formation, are very unusual to Nina and are not something that she's ever seen before.
I think by now, completely forgetting herself, she will lean right in over his shoulder, maybe even grabbing him by the shoulders and say, "What are you working on?"
Grabbing Steph by the shoulder and coming forth with this exclamation, quite to Steph's surprise, he jumps from his skin. Oh, Nina, and you can see him very quickly and swiftly scoop his hands across the table to fold everything he's working on into a pouch on his apron. And they all slot in neatly, and he folds a little flap over the top. And slightly shaking, turns over his shoulder and looks at you with wide eyes and a somewhat forced but sincere enough smile on his face. Nina, I didn't expect you to be awake so early.
Oh, morning, Opa. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
Oh, no, nothing scary about seeing my granddaughter in the morning. I was just working on this new hybrid. Follow me. And he gets up quickly from his chair, moving across his workshop from the bench where he keeps his tools over to the section of the greenhouse that gets the best light, where you'll see all myriad of plant experiments that line the tables and shelves of this section of his workshop. And he directs you over to one particular plant in amongst the many that all seem to be pretty haphazardly categorized. But this one particular plant he points to is a very tall, thin stalk that is a woodish brown and huge bulbous leaves that are almost like fruits in themselves, and at the ends of these leaves are very, very small blue fruits that resemble almost blueberries. There are 8 or 10 leaves that sprawl down the center of this stalk. I've been working on this one particularly for some time, and I think they're just about ready. And he plucks one very delicately from the edge and hands it to you with expectant eyes.
No, can I try it?
Of course.
Thank you. I take it, turn it over in my hand, look at Kota for a moment.
Kota is indulging himself in the second of the 2 snacks that he had stowed away with him in your gown.
Good. I pop it in my mouth.
As you begin to chew on this blueberry-like fruit, there is a hugely bitter taste that overcomes your mouth, and I'll need to get you to roll a constitution to see whether you are able to not wince at the sheer bitterness of it.
That is a 15.
Should Nina choose to conceal it, she just about has the resolve to make it not seem as if this fruit were almost stinging her tongue with its bitterness. Would Nina be honest or not in this scenario?
I think she would maybe sugarcoat the truth of this. She pops it in her mouth. You maybe see her eyes begin to water slightly. Almost ready. Nearly.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? How does it taste?
It's sharp. Good sharp. But maybe tone it down just a little bit on the sharpness.
Oh.
But it's great. It's really coming along.
Oh, that's good. That's fantastic. I was attempting to create the bitterest fruit I possibly could.
Oh, she sighs with a bit of relief. Well, you succeeded in that. It's very bitter.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, this should fast track my cure for sadness quite considerably. Excellent. Many things to do today. I should make my rounds in the orchards, although there are some things to finish up in the workshop. What are you doing today, Nina?
Oh, I'm surprised you're so busy. I thought you said today was a rest day.
Yes. I suppose it was, but, I woke up quite early this morning with, some fantastical ideas swinging and swimming in my head. And, I stood out on the veranda for a little while and, had to think about it, and, I think today is a day, for creation, you see.
Oh, a special day.
A special day, yes. I will rest this evening, of course. It is important, but no. I think the thickness in the air is just right for making something new and special. Yes.
I will look at him slightly suspiciously, aware of what I've just seen in him, but refrain from asking any more questions as I see he's in a great mood today, and instead say, thickness of the air. Well, I suppose I should be creating something then as well.
I think it would be a perfect day for it. What do you have in mind?
Well, I was thinking of finishing that totem I've been working on.
Yes,
the carving. So I could, try maybe do that and maybe write a letter. That was my other thought. Both, I guess, are creative in some way.
Certainly. The orchard could certainly use a few more totems, and, yes, if it feels right to be writing a letter, certainly do so, Nina.
Great, maybe I'll start the day with that and then see where it takes me.
Wonderful. Yes. Well, must be getting on. Do close the door of the workshop behind you, if you would.
Yes, I will do, and have you had breakfast, Opa?
Oh, well, no, I've seemed to have forgotten.
How about pancakes?
You know what? I was just about to say pancakes.
Could put some of those new berries on them. Maybe not.
We'll leave them for now, yes.
Great, I'll get going on that.
And he takes your hand just before you leave and squeezes it. Thank you, Nina. You do look after me.
You look after me as well. And I squeeze his hand back.
And then you see sort of small something in his head overtake his mind and glaze his eyes for a second, and his smile just tapers off a little bit as he lets go your hand, and almost as if remembering something very sharply, turns and returns to his work bench.
Shaking my head to myself, I slip out of the room, closing the door behind me. And as I go, I turn to Kota and say, secretive man. We'll never find the bottom of him.
And Kota looks up at you as you say this, just licking his paws clean of the lasts of his snack. peering into your eyes, almost as inquisitively as yours.
No, I've never seen anyone more full of secrets either. Would you like some pancakes?
And at this, almost as if Kota understands the words, begins to scramble as hard as he can out of your apron and towards the kitchen where he knows the pancakes are made.
Incredible. And we go there, and I start pulling out all sorts of ingredients and whip up a nice batch of fluffy pancakes, and all the while just chatting to Kota about our plans for the day, where we might go. I know that after I write this letter, it will need posting, and maybe we could go for a walk as well. And once I have a nice big stack of pancakes covered with sun pear jam, the last of the sun pear jam, I'll bring it up to Steph in the workshop and kind of wordlessly just leave it next to him.
Which he gratefully receives, although slightly distracted by the time that you've made your way up back to his workshop. He appears to be lying on the floor with one of his many plant experiments suspended from the ceiling, hanging over top his head, and he seems to be almost as if, as Orla would understand it, a mechanic underneath a car, sort of inspecting the plant from this strange vantage point and trimming parts of it from underneath. And he doesn't look away, but he very gratefully receives the pancakes and continues on his work.
I think there's a brief moment where Nina will flip her head upside down as well, her glasses maybe falling back over her hair, trying to see what on earth he's seeing from this angle. And again, just shaking her head and backing slowly out of the room.
Wonderful. So, with breakfast made and plans discussed with Kota, finishing up the last of those deliciously fluffy pancakes that is somewhat of Nina's specialty, licking the last of the sun pear jam from the plate. What are Nina's next moves?
I think she has already spoken it out loud, so she has committed to writing another letter. So she will take some fresh sheets of parchment and a charcoal pencil and sit in the big rocking chair that's out on the veranda porch area that overlooks the whole orchard. It's her favourite place to sit in the evenings and in the early mornings. And curling up on the big rocking chair, she will sit down and write a letter. I think she's going to write a letter to her father. And before she begins writing, she's not the most practiced with her glyphs, and she knows how important those calligraphy lessons were while she had schooling. And so she will do a few practice glyphs beforehand, allowing her hand to feel that clumsy stroke of each letter before starting her letter. I think she will say, "Hey, Dad. How are you? Opa and I have been very busy these last few weeks, preparing for the harvest at the Grove. Though I'm sure not as busy as you are in the workshop. I hope that business is going well." And then she'll go back and cross out the word business and instead write the craft. "I hope the craft is going well. What beautiful creations are you making these days? You'll be happy to hear that the sun pears are doing really well again this season, thanks to all the rain. And I'll be sure to post you some jam. when they're ripe. And Opa has been working really hard on some new creations, which I'm not sure will quite be in your taste, but you do like berries, so maybe. But I can't say too much about these yet because I think they're still a secret. Speaking of secrets, I was wondering if you might be able to maybe tell me a little bit more about Granny Freya, and anything at all really, what she was like when she was alive. I've tried asking Opa, but you know how he is anyway. Okay, I've got to go. I've got stuff to make today. But please give my love to Mom and Lyra and Asha and, of course, Ollie. Love, Nina. P.S. I'm not sure if you've gotten the last few letters. I think there's maybe some problems with the post. Anyway, I'll keep the letters coming, and I hope to hear from you soon.
And as Nina finishes very meticulously the last of these glyphs in her letter, signing herself off, looking back at the page she's just written, what kinds of thoughts and feelings are going through her head about what she's just written, to who she's written to?
I think, firstly, holding up the letter, she feels slightly disappointed. Not that it's the 5th letter that she's written. Well, I guess that's part of it. And also the quality of the glyphs. She looks at them and sees how messy they are, and feels frustrated at the neatness of her work and her inability to make it look clean and professional. And I think she thinks for a moment about Ollie, her little brother, who was only 4 when she left Moriwold. And it strikes her, oh my gosh, he must be at least 12 now? The same age that she was when she left the city. And a part of her is wondering how he's doing. If he's as clever as Lyra or as talented as Asha. And what he even looks like. And I think she feels a pang of guilt at not having been there for him and not seen him grow up.
So, with these feelings of disappointment and intrigue for her siblings, with licks of guilt all thrown in and swirling around in Nina's mind and heart, what does she now do with this letter that she's completed?
I think, having finished up the letter, she will seal it with a piece of wax and tuck it into her apron. No time like the present, eh? She'll say, turning to Kota. Probably best to get this posted sooner rather than later, and I think I fancy a walk. How about you?
And once again, almost as if understanding the words, jumps up from your lap and shoots up the side of your arm and over onto your shoulder, sitting up on 2 feet, looking out across the open space and the orchard surrounding, as if ready to explore.
What do you think? No, maybe we shouldn't. But if we did, that clearing that we went to before, you remember that, right?
You see almost a little glint in Kota's eye, and a shaking and ruffling of his head, which to you indicates an enthusiastic yes.
But we really shouldn't. But maybe we'll just see where the path takes us. See where we end up. How about that?
And there's a jovial chirping and grumbling that comes from Kota. It makes you feel like he's very much in agreement.
Great. I nuzzle him with my face before heading back into the house. I'm going to, this time careful not to scare him, pop my head in around the door of Steph's workshop again and just say, "Hey Opa, I'm thinking of going and posting this letter nice and early and might take a walk with Kota."
As you peer around the edge of the workshop door to see Steph, who appears now to be standing on a small wooden stool, attempting to reach some of the upper shelves of his plant experiments, now facing away from you, sort of half calls over his shoulder in response. "Oh, yes, Nina. Very good. Enjoy yourself. Remember to thank the sunshine."
Yes, always. And don't forget lunch, right? I should be back by then, but if I'm not, I've left more jam on the counters, or there's some of that nice soup from yesterday.
And he sort of waves his hand in reassurance, saying, yes, lunch always will be eaten, or something.
Okay, well, good luck with your creativity, and I'll see you in a bit.
See you shortly, Nina. See you shortly. And you can see him just really almost overstretching to reach a very, very tiny pot on the top shelf. And just as the stool begins to rock back and forth, he grabs it and stabilizes.
Oh, but you really shouldn't be standing on high stools. If you take a fall, you could hurt yourself, you know?
And as he, in fairness to him, very carefully makes his way down the wooden stool and spins around to you holding this small pot in hand, looks at you with slightly furrowed brow and a small smirk on his face. "I'm a lot more nimble than you think, Nina. Who do you think built this whole place, eh?"
Yeah, I know it. Okay, well, just be safe. I won't be gone for long.
You too.
Always.
He potters off back to his desk.
Great. I think by now Kota has wriggled out of my apron, so I just tie it around my waist. I'm wearing the same thing that I wear every day, which is a linen shirt and linen trousers, and over the top I'm wearing 3 or even 4 coloured skirts piled on top of that. And I'm going to grab a few pieces of fruit from the kitchen and pack them into my rucksack. And I don't think there's much else I'll need. So a few snacks, my letter, don't forget the letter, and head out into the day. Getting down from the treehouse is always an interesting affair. There is a platform that connects to the veranda and 2 huge wheel mechanisms that you have to kind of crank the lever to release the platform, and it half releases, half crashes to the ground.
And would you roll me a sleight of hand to decide just how well you achieve this today?
It's another natural 1.
So Nina, ready with her provisions and letter in backpack, heads onto the veranda over to the moving platform that lowers her down to the ground in the grove. And as she begins to crank the mechanism, always a very anxiety-inducing moment, as if one doesn't get it quite right, things can go very quickly. Unfortunately, this time round doesn't quite have her hand on the crank, and slipping just and moving with the tension of the rope that keeps it in place, hand still firmly on the crank, is almost forced to have her hand move around with this autonomous rope that is moving by itself as the whole platform moves very, very quickly down to the ground, not entirely dictated by gravity, but almost so that when she lands, thankfully on the springy platformed buffer created by Steph especially for these unfortunate occasions, lands with quite a jolt and bounces up and down quite vigorously until slowly coming to a standstill, and Nina is able to step off.
She will look at Kota apologetically.
As she looks at Kota, she'll see that his hair is all standing on end and his teeth are bared, and it looks quite aggressive, but you can see that this is mostly a angry fear response of Kota's.
Oh, I'm so sorry, friend. It's a bit unlucky that should go that way today. Bad luck, bad luck. Oh, the totem. I forgot the totem. No wonder I have bad luck. You can stay here. I'm sorry, but I have to go back up again.
As Nina enters back in to the moving platform, roll me another sleight of hand.
That is a 4.
This is less chaotic than the descent. However, due to the way in which it came down so quickly, the rope became slack and somewhat tangled at the bottom, so it requires a small process of unpicking and then a very arduous crank back up as you're effectively aligning the rope back up to the cogs. But with some effort of strength and persistence, somewhat longer than usual in how long it would take Nina to get to the top, she eventually makes her way back to the veranda.
Grumbling under her breath. This is not a very lucky day. She'll make her way back in to her bedroom, grabbing the totem almost finished totem. There was still a little bit of work to do, but perhaps she could do that on the way.
If you would describe the totem that Nina is holding.
Yeah, sure. It's a almost perfectly circular ball of stone, and looping around there are what look like somewhat crudely carved vines and flowers that just spiral around like a handcrafted marble, slightly bigger, fits in the palm of her hand. And it's a small offering of creativity that she will pack into her bag before heading back on that treacherous journey down the side of the tree.
And so, with totem safely in her bag, please roll me one final sleight of hand.
This will be the death of Nina. 20.
Having had enough tumultuous experience with this platform, Nina exceedingly gracefully lowers herself to the ground, getting back into the groove of exactly how she knows to lower herself with this mechanism, so much so that when she reaches the ground, she barely wobbles at all upon the springed platform and hops straight off quite elegantly, with Kota stood staring at her on the ground as she descends.
You know, Kota, I still don't understand why we can't just climb the tree to get into the house. I understand that Open needs extra help, that he's getting old. And I know the tree is sacred and special, but I don't think they mind when we climb them. Do you mind? I turn to the tree. Do you mind? See, I don't think it minds.
The tree gently sways in the breeze in response. And so, having fully remembered everything that she needs for the day, where is Nina heading now?
She's going to make her way through the center of the orchard, looking at the trees as she passes, just inspecting to see how they're doing, before cutting right and making her way to the path that leads out of the orchard. And it's the path that leads to the main village, but also deeper into the forest. And I think without delay or hesitation, perhaps only stopping to inspect the fruit here and there, or speak to one of the older trees, she would make her way out of the orchard.
So, making her way across the orchard, carefully removing her shoes before she does so. Roll me an investigation.
That is a 2.
It's a very pleasant walk across the orchard, especially in this late morning sun, on a very clear, crisp day. And all of the trees, all of the bushels seem particularly fresh, particularly vibrant and fecund. Enough to make Nina take pause if she wished to, and feel grateful for the abundance that she has been lucky enough to grow up in and around.
And that's exactly what Nina will do. as she's passing one of the older fruit trees, she would lay her palms and press her forehead into the bark of the tree and breathe deeply. She relies very heavily on her sense of smell and her sense of touch and sound, mostly because of her poor eyesight. And she gets a good sense of how the trees in the orchard are feeling or how they're doing from the smell of them.
And as she does so, head pressed against the ridged bark of this tall old tree, inhaling deeply, roll me a perception with advantage.
That's a natural 20.
There's a lot that Nina feels she can ascertain from the fragrance of a tree, the many fragrances that come from its bark and its leaves and its very respiration, in fact. And feeling particularly in tune with all of these things. She can tell that this tree is indeed thriving.
That's a relief. And there's nothing that makes her more grounded and more grateful for the abundance that they have in the orchard than the happiness of the trees. And as she moves away, she whispers a quick thank you to the trees, and she feels that totem in her pocket, and she's almost tempted to place this totem here, thankful for this moment that she's had, but she thinks otherwise, remembering the grove, the clearing that she has visited before, and instead just bows her head and moves on.
So, fully allowing herself to be present in this moment of gratitude, Nina moves on, makes her way across the remaining portion of the orchard, exiting out, whereupon the trees begin to dwindle, sliding her shoes back on, heads onto the dirt track, a road that will lead her to town, where she will find people and a place to post her letter, and where she may also find her hidden glade, where she is keen to secretively explore. And with these ideas in her mind, she sets forth along the road.